When you read the title of today's content, do you possess Buddha nature? What's the first thing that comes to mind? The Buddha taught that all sentient beings possess Buddha nature, all can attain Buddhahood. This teaching has been reiterated throughout time, becoming a timeless truth. It's therefore not hard to see that most Buddhists and those exploring Buddhist philosophy subconsciously understand that they surely possess something called Buddha nature. However, it's strange that very few truly believe, from the bottom of their hearts, that they themselves can become a Buddha. Some even consider Buddhahood an unattainable fantasy. Instead, they fall into a state of half-belief, half-doubt believing they have Buddha nature, but thinking they must practice diligently to become a Buddha. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche pointed out that saying things like, "I want to practice to become a Buddha," or "I pursue the path of enlightenment to achieve liberation," may sound acceptable. But these words are no different from saying, "I want the clouds to disappear so the sun can appear." This is a misconception, because whether clouds cover it or not, the sun is always there. And Buddha nature is the same. Buddha nature is always inherent within you. So why do many still believe that becoming a Buddha is a distant goal requiring intense effort and practice, demanding a high level of enlightenment? When your conviction in something is insufficient or wavering, it means you lack a rational foundation. In other words, you lack right view. When one lacks right view, their thoughts are easily swayed by wrong views. Wrong views are mistaken judgments and beliefs. This will keep them forever submerged in the cycle of suffering and ignorance. Today, in this content, summarized from Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche's book, The View and Path in Buddhism, the author of the book, Right View, which I previously introduced in a video, this work has been widely embraced, understood, and brought enlightenment to many. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche is a Lama of the Sakya lineage of Tibetan Buddhism in Bhutan, the holder of the third Dzongsar Khyentse lineage. You know, books and people meeting are all due to karma and affinity, and this work is no different for you. This is a book that offers a wise, concise, and comprehensive interpretation of the most core concepts in Buddhist philosophy. In today's content, we will focus on summarizing and conveying the essence of the book to clarify 3 issues. 1. Misconceptions about Buddha nature that lead to endless physical and mental suffering. 2. The deep-rooted causes of these misunderstandings. 3. The core method to dispel the clouds of ignorance and reveal the Buddha nature within you. It is hoped that a correct understanding of these core concepts of Buddhist philosophy will allow you to shed layers of prejudice, contribute to the awakening of wisdom, and help you return to the right path of practice, thereby achieving true liberation and tranquility of the soul. Now, let's explore the misunderstandings about Buddha nature that cause you endless suffering. Buddha nature is a central concept in Buddhism, yet it is often misunderstood in 2 opposing extremes: eternalism and nihilism. What is eternalism? Eternalism means permanent and unchanging. Those attached to eternalism believe that existence truly exists. This might sound confusing, but simply put, it means they believe in the immutable existence of a supernatural entity. This entity could be Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, divine mothers, and so on. These exalted beings possess the power to bestow blessings and grace upon sentient beings, helping them achieve success, fame, and prosperity. However, the problem is that such a conception only increases belief in the self or ego. When you believe that there is an external divine power protecting and guiding you, the mind automatically splits into subject and object. If the objects the gods, Buddhas, spirits are bestowing blessings, there must be a subject to receive that protection. And that subject is the self within you, an ego that you believe is experiencing, owning possessions, fame, or this body. This view makes people dependent on external forms of worship, such as prayer, offerings, temple visits, accumulating merit at the beginning of the year, fortune-telling, and so on. They place heavy emphasis on rituals while neglecting the transformation of consciousness. If something good happens, people think the Buddha has blessed them. If misfortune strikes, they believe it's past karma or punishment from an external force. Gradually, we stop looking within our own minds for transformation and instead cling to a self that needs saving. A more serious consequence is that many people are easily led astray by erroneous doctrines, deceived by commercial forms of worship, or become immersed in fear and illusions of external salvation instead of returning to wisdom and inner liberation. If eternalism is the attachment to an eternal, unchanging essence, then its opposite extreme is nihilism, a view tending towards a complete severing of belief in Buddha-nature, cause and effect, or karma. What is nihilism? Nihilism means annihilation, absolute cessation. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche explains this concept with a profound statement. Nihilism refers to those who believe that non-existence truly exists. Here, non-existence refers to Buddha-nature, karma, karmic force, and so on. Those attached to nihilism believe that all these are merely abstract concepts that do not exist in reality. They only believe in what can be directly perceived by the self, the body, mind, and senses. According to them, everything from the formation of the universe to the birth of each human being is random. They do not believe in an afterlife, nor in the continuation of consciousness after death. For them, death is the end. Therefore, such people often deny spiritual practice, believing that it solves nothing, and of course, they will consider becoming a Buddha an utterly fantastical idea. Eternalism and nihilism are two extremes that lead to a misguided understanding of Buddha-nature. One side believes that Buddha-nature is something eternally blissful, requiring absolute sincerity and diligent effort to attain. The other side believes that Buddha-nature is something abstract, distant, and impractical. However, if we observe carefully, we will see that whether it is eternalism or nihilism, or a person holding both views, all stem from the belief in a definitively existing self asterisk. It is this self that decides whether Buddha-nature exists or not. And thus, this perspective cannot escape the mind's dualistic division. Genuine Buddha-nature is not created by anything. It is not the result of anything. It transcends cause and effect. Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche points out that we should abandon preconceived notions about Buddha-nature and simply view it as a natural state when ignorance disappears. We need to know that our own ignorance is not something truly and eternally existent. It is, in fact, a product of impermanence arising from various conditions. This means that you can control and weaken the conditions that give rise to ignorance, or strengthen the factors that counteract ignorance, or combine both, making the eradication of ignorance entirely feasible. Remember that anything created can be destroyed. Only Buddha-nature is unborn and undying. It is already inherently present within you. Buddha-nature does not arise because you practice, nor does it disappear because you doubt or ignore it. If ignorance and negative karma are completely eliminated, something will remain. And that state is not entirely empty. That state is what we often call wisdom, fundamental goodness, Buddhahood, Buddha-nature. Because Buddha-nature is the state when ignorance disappears, and our true nature is not ignorance, we are inherently Buddha-nature. That is the true nature of all of us. So the next question is, how do we eliminate ignorance, the core method for ignorance to disappear? What is ignorance? Ignorance, accurately understood, is the lack of understanding of the true nature of life, wherein the self is the most core ignorance, an illusion labeled as real, which we mistakenly take for truth. Like a car, it's a name for an assembly of components, wheels, engine, chassis. Only when all of them are put together is it called a car. If you separate each part, the car no longer exists, and the self is the same. According to Buddhist philosophy, the self is merely a temporary label assigned to the combination of the 5 aggregates, skandhas. 1. Form aggregate, rupaskandha, refers to the physical body. 2. Feeling aggregate, vedanaskandha. ** includes pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensations, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. 3. Perception aggregate, samjnaskandha, ** concepts regarding sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and mental objects. 4. Volitional formations aggregate, samskara skandha, includes mental impulses like determination, compulsion, and attention. 5. Consciousness aggregate, vijnana skandha, the awareness of the 6 senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. If you consider the feelings or sensations from any of the 5 aggregates to be solid, you will believe that the self is a real foundation. And when the self has a real foundation, it will always seek to affirm its existence. It is full of pride, lacks a sense of security, always fears losing what it possesses: property, territory, status, or relationships. Everything it strives to achieve is merely to reinforce its belief in its own existence. The eruption of strong emotions is another trick of the self. For example, when you scream in anger, the object of that anger becomes clearer, which helps to reinforce your belief that yourself is real. The feeling of intense love is similar. When we love someone, we fall into the same mechanism. The common definition of love is deep care for others and a willingness to sacrifice. But in reality, love is just another way for the self to seek validation of its existence. The self only loves itself. It doesn't truly love others. It is full of itself, leaving no space for true love. Because it is too focused on itself, it doesn't truly see others but only pays attention to whether that person meets its needs, desires, or expectations. For instance, when you say, "I love you," what you actually want to ask is, "Do you love me? I want to possess you. I want you to make me happy." To prove its definite existence, the self within you becomes something that can never be satisfied. It constantly demands your time, energy, and attention. Only when you give up the self, step into a state called non-self, anatta, can true love emerge and ignorance disappear. So how do we abandon the self? According to Buddhist philosophy, abandoning the self is not about rejecting all emotions, thoughts, and experiences from the self. What we need to abandon is self-clinging, the attachment and belief that the self is real. As Tilopa once said, "It is not the phenomena that delude you, but you're clinging to the phenomena that deludes you." We need to understand an important point. The self always seeks things that can prove its definitive existence in this world. But the truth is that in a system that is inherently impermanent and has no fixed entity, if one constantly seeks definitive existence, the inevitable result will be suffering. Therefore, instead of saying that the self is striving to find things to reinforce its existence, a more awakening way to express it is that the self within you is actually seeking the causes of suffering *. Only when you stop seeking and stop creating suffering will ignorance gradually dissipate. At that point, you will realize that there is nothing to achieve, nothing to add, because your true state is already complete. Buddha-nature is not something distant that needs effort or striving for, nor is it a condition that you need to accumulate or possess. It is always there. And as soon as the mist of ignorance dissipates, you naturally manifest in your inherent wisdom and awakening. So the next question is, how does the self stop seeking and continue creating suffering? The remedy prescribed by the Buddha to help us liberate ourselves from suffering is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the path to embark on the spiritual journey, to cultivate a mind of renunciation for complete liberation from suffering. The Four Noble Truths are often misunderstood as life is suffering. Life is a sea of suffering, leading many to merely accept life as a series of woes. But Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche emphasizes that the core realization of the Four Noble Truths must be to know suffering. For example, if you have a toothache, you must recognize that you are in pain to find a cure. Some might argue, anyone in pain surely knows they are suffering. What's there to discuss? However, the issue here is that your fate is not just about obvious pains that are easily recognized directly. A large part of suffering is something you yourself are not even aware of as suffering. You might even mistake suffering for joy or pleasure. For instance, the pursuit of material possessions, status, fame, security, or when intense suffering diminishes, even though it's still suffering, we call it happiness. In Buddhist philosophy, what is called suffering is the process of doing, experiencing, and possessing things without understanding their true nature. Because we don't clearly understand the nature of suffering, people are even less concerned with its causes. It is only when the pain becomes too heavy beyond salvage that you realize it. But by then, you are already deeply entrenched in extreme suffering. People always try to eliminate major sufferings, but often replace one form of suffering with another. Like when heartbroken, many rush into a new relationship to forget the past, thinking it's happiness. Only when new sufferings arise do they realize it, or sometimes not even then. We keep repeating the same story with different scripts. Each time we think this time it will be happiness, not suffering. But each time we are disappointed. The Buddha called this repetitive suffering prolonged instability. And our self is inherently unstable without a fixed entity, so looking deeply into it, the essence of the self is suffering. Therefore, to escape suffering, we must know suffering that is, recognize suffering. Like a doctor diagnosing an illness, we must acknowledge that the self is the source of suffering. And this is the first truth in the Four Noble Truths, called the truth of suffering, dukkha, to clearly know the true nature of suffering. The second truth in the Four Noble Truths is the truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya, which means the cause of suffering. This teaching was prescribed by the Buddha based on the principle of prevention being better than cure. To prevent an illness from occurring, one must understand its causes. According to Buddhist philosophy, there are basically 3 types of suffering. Each type is linked to a core cause. They intertwine, forming a web of unease and afflictions that bind human beings. 1. The suffering of formation, samskara dukkha. This suffering is deeply rooted in ignorance, the lack of understanding of our own true nature, which is inherently free and without suffering, but which always seeks to grasp an independently existing self. As mentioned earlier, the self is inherently unstable and moreover yearns to prove its own existence, so it is always restless, always craving something to stabilize it, but this is impossible. It is precisely this craving and clinging that keeps us entangled in the cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death, where each life merely repeats the tragedy of the previous one. Remarkably, people are often unaware that they are enduring the suffering of formation. This is because the self is very cunning and clever. It tricks us with the ploy of distraction. It wants us to focus all our attention on the other 2 types of suffering, the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. This leads us to blindly pursue external things to prevent and treat symptoms, forgetting to cure the root cause of the illness. The irony lies in the fact that precisely when we believe we are solving suffering, we are actually cultivating the conditions for the cycle of rebirth to repeat. 2. The suffering of suffering, dukkha dukkha. These are the inevitable pains that everyone faces when born, including difficulties in survival, living conditions, and family circumstances. These are also the most direct and easily recognizable sufferings. 3. The suffering of change, viparinama dukkha. This means suffering due to change. It arises when you long for joy, pursuing comfort that you wish would last and be stable. But all things are constantly changing, and nothing is permanent. When health declines, money diminishes, relationships change, or when desired things are achieved but no longer satisfy, suffering immediately appears. And it is especially important to note that all these sufferings originate from negative karma, creating a chain reaction of karmic forces that bind us. We often mistakenly understand negative karma as morally wrong actions we have committed in the past. But in fact, negative karma is not limited to bad behavior. Any action stemming from clinging to the self, reinforcing the ego, and distancing us from our true nature is called negative karma. Specifically, these are actions arising from greed, anger, and delusion, the 3 poisons, tham, san, si asterisk. Because of greed, we believe that pleasure brings us happiness. Because of anger, we always use rage to eliminate what we hate. Because of delusion, we think we will be safe by ignoring things that are neither lovable nor hateful, those neutral experiences or phenomena like deep breaths, sitting still, etc. But we are completely wrong. Greed pushes us into endless suffering. Anger not only fails to destroy the object you want to avoid, but also attracts it closer, often appearing unexpectedly as different forms of suffering, striking you with a painful blow. Understanding the truth of the origin of suffering, we realize that ignorance is the root. By clinging to the self, we create greed, anger, and delusion, and these actions, in turn, become karma. Negative karma feeds ignorance, and ignorance continues to create negative karma, extending the cycle of samsara endlessly. So what is the way out? The best way is to stop creating negative karma, immediately ceasing all actions arising from greed, anger, and delusion. Next is the third truth of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of cessation, nirodha, which means the end of suffering. But cessation here does not mean using some method or practice to make suffering disappear. The cessation of suffering occurs when you fully understand that our suffering does not truly exist. Realizing this truth is extremely important. If suffering genuinely existed in your nature, you would never be able to eliminate it because it would be an inherent part of you. Therefore, the Buddha taught that the truth of cessation means the illness is not you, and you are not the illness. Once you understand this, you can cure the illness by first firmly believing that suffering is not part of your true nature, and then applying appropriate methods to transform suffering. This is the path guided by wisdom. Finally, the fourth truth of the Four Noble Truths is the truth of the path Magga. The path here refers to the way to complete liberation from suffering. It is the culmination of the previous three truths: correct understanding of suffering, ceasing to create the causes of suffering, greed, anger, delusion, understanding that suffering does not truly exist, and finally, directly realizing the state of liberation. The truth of the path teaches us to abandon the habits that the self has accumulated over countless eons, habits that have prevented us from manifesting our inner Buddha nature. Reflecting deeply, we will see that letting go is not something grand and difficult, because the things you let go of never truly existed anyway. There is a truth we rarely realize. The root of suffering comes from our tendency to dramatize problems. The self always tricks you into chasing the future. It wants you to think about what you'll do tomorrow, plan for retirement, worry about what you can do for your children even before they are born. Moreover, it always tries to harmonize with others and expects others to harmonize with it. Therefore, it considers its own demands and needs to be immensely important. So, when faced with undesirable situations, physical pain, an offensive remark, or simply someone interrupting you, or a roommate not washing dishes after eating, getting stuck in traffic when in a hurry, and so on, yourself will immediately react with anger, anxiety, or fear. It acts like a child screaming for pampering, wanting to be the center of the universe, proving its existence, and unintentionally causing us to sow more karmic suffering. In such moments, what we need to do is breathe deeply, gently smile, and tell ourselves, "This isn't serious, is it?" This is a lighthearted phrase, yet it contains immense power. Anyone who can say this about any big or small matter in life has truly stepped onto the path of liberation and possesses the mind of renunciation. Kshuet, detachment, means to escape from. Lai, renunciation, means to separate. A mind of renunciation is to escape from the dramatization of problems by the self, to be able to view life with a light heart, not allowing the self to lead one into delusion. At this point, some might wonder, if I consider nothing important, won't I become indifferent and despise everything? Then remember that renunciation here is not about abandoning life. It doesn't require you to shave your head, enter a monastery, or isolate yourself from the mundane world. Rather, it helps you stop dedicating your entire life to meaningless pursuits. Crucially, it helps you realize that the things you give up, whether for yourself or related to others, bring no benefit, nor do they bring you true joy. Essentially, you are giving up the obsession of the self. A self that tends to exaggerate everything. A self that isn't real. A self whose nature is suffering. A self veiled by ignorance. So how much time do you have left? Humans live in the illusion that death is far away, even though the Grim Reaper lurks in every moment. We've built safe lives with grand houses, expensive medicine, and nutrition, but in the end, we cannot foresee our last breath. Birth and death are inherently illogical and unavoidable, yet the self clings to the naive belief that I won't die anytime soon. To maintain this illusion, it makes us busy accumulating wealth, chasing fame, indulging in fleeting pleasures, as if material possessions can shield us from the scythe of death. But this is precisely the paradox of ignorance. The more we flee the truth of death, the more we lose awareness of the fragility of human life, a short life, like a water bubble, ready to burst at any moment. And how many such lives have we lived without knowing it? Because the self doesn't want us to realize the fragility of life, and even less does it want us to be brave enough to face it. So how much time do you have? If you continue to chase the clouds of ignorance, you will have an eternity in illusion, an endless loop of countless lives with many different roles, but the same script: craving, suffering, and accumulating negative karma. But if right now you realize that the time of this life is running out, you will cherish every moment, transforming every action and event in life into an opportunity for practice, to transform your consciousness. As the mist of ignorance gradually dissipates, a voice of urgency will resonate within you. I don't want to be trapped in samsara, in the illusory world created by the self. I need to change my habits. Tradition teaches us to hold reverence for the Buddhas, but Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche said that reverence is not blind submission, but rather the result of inquiry and experience. That is, you may have an understanding of Buddha-nature, non-self, impermanence, and the Four Noble Truths, but if you don't practice them in daily life, it's just a false reverence. In truth, the one who most needs your reverence is none other than the pure soul within you. It is the river of wisdom, the compassion flowing beneath the dry, barren layers of ignorance. It is the Buddha nature inherent within you. Be reverent to yourself with right view and firm action. When a moment of enlightenment brightens your mind, urging you to escape the labyrinth of samsara, you will realize that all greed, anger, and delusion are merely bad habits nurtured by the self over countless eons to obscure your true nature and hinder your aspiration to practice. So, the best tool to free yourself from the chains of samsara is to fight fire with fire. Use good habits to replace bad ones, and the most crucial habit for liberation is to cultivate a mind of renunciation. Start with the smallest things. Spend 1 to 2 minutes each day contemplating impermanence to clearly see the illusory and suffering nature of the self. When the self begins to waste time, chase desires or pleasures, when it gets angry over trivial things, anxious about the future, or sad about the past, when it starts to be selfish, arrogant, wanting attention, then complaining and blaming, withdraw from clinging to those emotions and thoughts so you can gently smile and say, "This isn't serious, is it?" And finally, you will realize that suffering is not you, and you are not suffering. And so, you walk lightly, you still work, still experience, without attachment. That is the stepping stone that allows you to find absolute freedom, where the Buddha nature within you naturally manifests. We don't need to add light, we need to clear away the mist covering our eyes. Buddha nature is not something to strive for or reject, but an experience when we dare to stop chasing desires, stop reinforcing belief in the definite existence of the self, stop creating more negative karma, stop dramatizing everything, and even stop trying to become a Buddha. Be like plants that don't try to grow taller than the ground, nor fear storms, but simply are themselves in every moment. That is the deepest meaning of the question, do you possess Buddha nature? When a child realizes the ghost in the dark room is just a coat hanging on a hook, the fear vanishes. Enlightenment is the same. It's not a mystical state, but the cessation of illusion. You don't need to become anyone else. You just need to see clearly that the self is merely an actor playing a role on the stage of life. So, right now, are you ready to be liberated? Do you truly want to enter the state of non-self? Please share your thoughts in the comments below.